Okay, let's unpack this. If you've ever had that feeling, um, that dizzying, gut-wrenching sense that the modern world is just fundamentally chaotic.
Mhm.
Like you're just a passenger in a runaway car, subject to these random, unpredictable crashes. Well, you are definitely not alone.
And that sensation, that chaos, it's so common.
That
But the argument here, in the sources we're looking at, is that it's not the true reality of the world.
It's a confusion.
It's a confusion, exactly. A confusion between the temporary script we're running
Right.
and the permanent lawful structure that sits underneath it all.
Right. Mistaking the symptoms for the actual architecture.
And that is the source of so much burnout, both for individuals and, for society as a whole. So today, we're going to attempt what you might call a conceptual extraction.
I like that.
We're inviting you, the listener, to make this really critical shift. A shift toward what the source material calls meta-orientation, or, and I love this term, story literacy.
Story literacy. Yes. That phrase is perfect. It's this incredibly liberating move from being, completely absorbed first-person style in the drama.
In your character's drama.
Yeah, to zooming out, to getting that third-person lucidity. You're moving from being the overwhelmed participant to becoming, the knowledgeable analyst.
You do this automatically when you watch a complex fictional universe.
Yeah.
Think about it. If you're watching, say, Game of Thrones, you analyze Westeros based on its own rules.
Sure, dragons exist, seasons last for decades. Those are the physics of that world.
Exactly. You understand the core conflict, that's the story, and you know the geopolitical boundaries,
Yeah.
that's the setting. You don't panic when a character fails
Yeah.
because you see the mechanics, you see the feedback loop of that world.
So our mission for this deep dive is to apply that exact level of structural analysis to our actual world.
Yeah.
Based entirely on the detailed sources we have, we're going to try to extract the source code of reality, describing it purely in terms of its story, its setting, and its mechanics.
And the practical payoff for you, for the listener, is navigation without that narrative absorption. When you stop confusing the temporary script.
Like the daily news cycle or some personal drama.
Right. When you stop confusing that for the permanent structure of how reality actually works, navigation just gets clearer. Your actions become more leveraged, and that feeling of constant, overwhelming anxiety, it starts to recede.
It's not about becoming detached.
No, not at all. It's about becoming accurate.
Okay, so we have a clear roadmap. We are going to dedicate our time today to really unpacking these core components. First up, we anchor ourselves in setting the finite, high-pressure environment that is our stage.
Then we'll dive into the story.
Right, the turbulent kind of adolescent narrative humanity is currently stuck in, and that includes the two big competing storylines, the LC and the HC.
Lower and higher consciousness, yeah.
And third, we get into the pure source code, the mechanics, the 5 unwritten, lawful rules that actually determine what happened.
And then we put it all together.
Finally, we synthesize all that clarity into a practical strategy for navigation, and we'll define your role in all of this as a literate node. Let's start where any good map begins, the physical stage. We're calling Earth a high-pressure learning environment. And the first sort of non-negotiable truth about this setting is its nature as a closed system. It operates through finite loops.
This is the essential architectural constraint. It's the one thing you can't argue with. Earth is not some cosmic Walmart where supplies are just infinitely restocked from a back room somewhere.
Right.
It is a closed biosphere, a self-contained habitat. The sources call it a high-density sandbox. And it's set against this backdrop of a vast, frankly indifferent universe.
So when we use that term closed system, what are the practical implications of that structure? I mean, really on the ground.
Oh, they're profound. I mean, we have to distinguish between energy flow and matter flow. That's the first step. Energy flows in one direction.
Sunlight comes in.
Sunlight comes in, it drives photosynthesis, it powers all of life, and then heat radiates back out into space. That's the engine, and it's an open engine. But the matter,
The actual stuff.
the actual physical stuff we build with and eat and breathe, that is fundamentally conserved, it's finite.
So the building blocks of life are just constantly being recycled.
Constantly. Matter is perpetually cycling in these finite closed loops. You've got the water cycle, the carbon cycle, nitrogen, phosphorus, all the vital minerals. We cannot simply discard waste or import new building blocks from outside the system.
There is no way.
There is no way. And that immediately establishes what the text calls the constraint of finitude. This is the root of all scarcity.
And it's so crucial to understand that scarcity isn't just, are we going to run out of oil? The sources are really clear that finitude applies to so much more than just physical resources.
Oh, absolutely. We are constrained by geological time. We're constrained by the limited storage capacity of our atmosphere for, say, carbon dioxide. We're constrained by our own finite individual attention spans, which is a huge one,
Hmm.
and by the sheer capacity of complex natural systems to absorb damage before they just shift states irreversibly.
That constraint is what turns this setting into a, what was the phrase? A hard mode survival and meaning setting.
Yes, it limits how many mistakes we can make before the feedback from the system hits a critical mass.
So if the constraints are that strict, why do we act like the world is infinite? It seems like our entire economic model is based on that assumption.
It is, and the reason is the difficulty of dealing with irreversible consequences and delayed feedback. The setting, the system, it enforces these lawful regularities, but the time scale is often vast. It's not human scale.
Right.
So a decision made today, let's say releasing a persistent organic pollutant into a river or clear-cutting an ancient forest, that decision propagates through the system invisibly. For years, for decades, the consequences are compounding, but they are hidden from our immediate short-term sensory experience.
Hmm.
We don't see it happening.
It's like taking out a loan. You get the money right away, which feels great.
Exactly.
But the interest is accumulating completely out of sight until that massive bill comes due.
That's the perfect analogy.
Ugh.
Ecological damage, climate shift, species loss, even deep cultural trauma.
Hmm.
These are all forms of systemic debt, and this debt compounds until the damage becomes undeniable, and the system destabilizes dramatically. A systemic collapse is often nothing more than the delayed feedback mechanism finally kicking in with overwhelming force because all the subtle signals were ignored for so long.
And that explains why short-term wins are so intoxicating. They're rewarded so quickly. You get the profit, the speed, the dopamine hit. But the coherence, the kind of thinking required to manage a long-term complex system, whether it's your own health, a company, or a planet, that's exponentially harder because the feedback requires sustained high-resolution attention.
And to manage that kind of attention, we have to recognize that the setting isn't flat. It's not just one thing. It's multi-layered. The sources talk about the layers of reality. If we only focus on the visible physical layer, we miss most of the mechanics of the whole system.
Okay, so let's break those down. Let's start with the most obvious one, but let's give it the depth it deserves. The physical layer.
Okay, so this layer is defined by, physics, chemistry, biology, and ecology. Its fundamental, non-negotiable rule is deep interdependence. When we look at, say, a physical forest, our standard LC storyline logic, which we'll get to.
The lower consciousness story.
Right. That logic sees isolated trees. It sees board feet of lumber. It sees resources to be extracted. But the physical layer actually functions as a network.
The source material is really adamant about this. A forest is not just a collection of trees, it's a network of relationships.
It is a vast self-regulating superorganism. It's sustained by these mycorrhizal fungal networks, which are basically the communication system of the forest floor. They redistribute nutrients, they send warning signals about pests.
It's incredible.
It is. And then you have climate feedback loops, carbon sequestration, species interactions. These are all dynamic relationships. You literally cannot understand the physical layer if you treat its components as isolated units available for extraction, ignoring that interdependence.
Mhm.
Well, that leads directly to the collapse we were just talking about.
Okay, so moving up, or maybe deeper in abstraction, we get to the energetic layer. How should we understand this? It can sound a little nebulous.
It can, but it's actually very practical. This is the flow of life force, of intentions, of collective emotional states. It's the vibes of a room or a community or a political moment. And we need to be clear. This isn't mystic woo-woo.
Right.
This is about observing where attention and emotional investment are being directed and then looking at the structure that emerges from that flow of energy.
And the core rule of this layer is that energy follows attention.
Yes, attention is the primary currency of this layer. What you focus on, whether it's constructive or destructive, it grows. It gains momentum. We see this in hyperpolarization, for instance. All the attention is directed toward conflict, which just reinforces the structure of conflict.
And what happens when that energy is blocked?
Blocked energy, like, say, mass-suppressed cultural trauma or a deep, unresolved injustice. It doesn't just go away, it stagnates. It accumulates pressure. And eventually it manifests as systemic volatility or an explosion or just unpredictable violence. The energetic layer translates our psychological state into structural reality.
And that connects directly, I assume, to the informational layer. If energy is following attention, our attention is increasingly being channeled by the code of reality. Language, data, algorithms, memes.
The informational layer is the code. This is where we have to realize that information isn't just descriptive, it's generative. It creates reality.
Give me an example.
Okay, a financial algorithm, it's just information, it's just code, but it can reshape entire economic systems overnight. An idea, a meme, can spread like a cognitive virus and change culture. And because of the interconnectedness of our global digital networks, change can propagate exponentially fast in this layer, much, much faster than the slow linear processing speed of the physical or even the energetic layers.
The sources talk about this ideal progression from data to information to knowledge to wisdom. Where are we stuck right now, in your view?
We are drowning in data and information, absolutely drowning, particularly the raw, uncontextualized, or emotionally charged kind. But we have a scarcity of knowledge and a severe famine of wisdom. Our systems are optimized for exponential information, growth speed, clicks, spread without any feedback loop to ensure a corresponding growth in wisdom or ethical integration. And that imbalance is one of the key drivers of that capability before wisdom bottleneck we'll get to later.
Okay, and finally, underlying all of this, the foundational field, the consciousness layer, which the sources define as the ocean.
Right. If the other three layers are the waves on the surface, the consciousness layer is the ocean itself. It's the field of awareness that underlies and connects everything. The metaphor in the sources is that consciousness is non-localized. It's a property of the whole system, which then expresses itself through localized points of experience, individual vortices.
So you, the person listening right now, you are one of those vortices. What does recognizing that actually change about the system?
Well, awareness itself, the basic act of observation, it shifts the system. We see evidence of this everywhere, from the quantum observer effect to the profound effectiveness of the placebo effect or conscious healing. Systemic health, or what the text calls coherence, emerges when these individual vortices align with truth.
When our personal model of reality accurately reflects the laws of the setting.
Precisely. In essence, it is the ocean recognizing itself through your individual experience. And that alignment, that's what transforms the chaotic script into a navigable reality.
Which brings us to where we are right now, structurally. The current stage, what the sources call the Anthropocene threshold, it feels like the perfect storm, the convergence point of all four of those layers.
It is. This threshold is where the complexity of all those layers hits critical mass. The word Anthropocene just means we are in the first era where a single species, a feud, humanity wields enough power to alter planetary systems on a geological scale.
We're not just having a local impact anymore, we're affecting the entire closed system.
We are, and the sources call this a critical window. That sounds terrifyingly specific, and it's meant to.
What's the window between?
It's the narrow window of time between two states. The first state is where we can destroy ourselves through our own power and our own short-sightedness. The second state is where we either become a sustainable, coherent civilization, or we fail. The test is running right now, today.
So the setting isn't neutral at all. It's a test environment for coherence.
Precisely. The environment is governed by that iron law of interdependence we talked about. The setting is actively pushing back. When we violate interdependence, say, by relying on an economic model that externalizes pollution and climate risk, the setting fights back.
And we see that as climate chaos.
We see it as climate chaos, resource wars, collapsing social trust. These aren't moral judgments from the universe. They're structural feedback loops enforcing the rule. Damaging the web destabilizes the web damager. The setting is demanding that our collective intelligence matures enough to respect the boundaries of the closed system it lives in.
Okay, so if that's the brutal, beautiful stage we are on, let's turn to the drama that's unfolding. The overarching human narrative, as the sources frame it, isn't some typical moral saga of good versus evil. It's defined as a coming-of-age story, a cosmic evolution drama with emergent intelligence subplots.
And this reframing is just essential. Viewing humanity as an adolescent species gives you clarity without, condemnation. The core plot line is actually quite simple. A species gains intelligence, its ability to model, predict, and manipulate the world much faster than it gains wisdom.
And wisdom is what? Emotional integration, understanding interdependence.
All of the above. They learn to manipulate their environment, but they don't yet grasp the true web of relationships that actually sustains that environment.
They confuse power with control.
Exactly. They confuse the ability to wield power with genuine, sustainable control. They take their primal fears, fear of death, scarcity, the unknown, and they externalize them into rigid institutions, hierarchies, and systems designed to extract resources and dominate others.
Right.
They exploit what they haven't yet recognized as a part of themselves.
So the central tension of the entire story becomes incredibly focused. Will intelligence mature into coherence, or will it just burn itself out through short-sighted optimization?
That is the capability before wisdom bottleneck. That's the whole game right now. We have the technical power of an adult. We can split the atom. We can synthesize new life forms. We can alter the global climate. But collectively, we have the emotional maturity of a teenager who's prone to panic and tribalism and extreme short-term thinking. That gap is the crisis.
And to really feel the intensity of this moment, we need to map this history onto what the sources call the three-act structure of human history. Let's start with Act 1.
Act 1 is the foundation. Emergence and innocence, which is basically the pre-industrial age. For millions of years, life is just organizing. Survival is the name of the game. And in that context, high competition, regional violence, the formation of strict hierarchies,
Yeah.
functionally, those are effective local strategies.
Right. They worked for survival against massive environmental threats, and the impact was contained.
It was contained regionally. And then comes the great acceleration. Act 2, expansion and rising power, the industrial age.
Humanity hits the gas pedal.
Hard. The invention of agriculture, tools, writing, and then eventually the Industrial Revolution powered by fossil fuels. It unlocks massive, unprecedented flows of energy. Intelligence just accelerates exponentially. We gain the ability to model the world and extract resources far, far faster than our emotional capacity matures.
And success in this era just reinforces that logic.
Consistently. The logic of extraction and domination is rewarded over and over again.
The sources point to a very specific plot point here. The invention of nuclear weapons in 1945. Why is that so significant?
Because that moment provided irrefutable proof to the species that our capability had globally outstripped our wisdom. It wasn't theoretical anymore. It proved that we could destroy the entire setting, moving the stakes from a regional collapse to a planetary existential risk.
So Act 2 starts to end when we become aware of that.
It starts ending when collective awareness of planetary consequences, ecology, global supply chains, resource limits, becomes broadly undeniable, sometime around the 1970s.
Which places us squarely in Act 3, reflexivity and the reckoning, the present day.
Right. And the defining characteristic of this act is that the intelligence we've developed is now powerful enough not only to alter planetary systems, but to create other sophisticated intelligences, namely AI.
And the old survival strategies.
The old survival logic that guaranteed success in Act 1, extracting from and dominating others, it no longer scales. In fact, those same strategies now actively destabilize the global setting.
So the tension is the species realizing that the very logic that made it so dominant is now the logic that will make existence unlivable.
Yes. The sources are very clear on this. We are living in the knowledge that the current path is unsustainable, yet the inertia, the deeply embedded LC storyline, keeps driving the machine forward.
Yeah.
That's the essence of the Crisis Act. You realize the need for radical transformation, but you're struggling to let go of the mechanisms of the past.
And this struggle manifests as the two competing storylines that are playing out right now, the LC and the HC narratives. This is like the split-screen movie we are all watching and participating in.
It is. So let's look at A, the LC storyline, or lower consciousness. This is the deep gravitational pull toward the cycle of extraction and collapse. Its theme is dominance, control, and the fundamental illusion of separation.
And the plot arc for this story is, well, it's tragic and it's predictable. Rise through extraction and control, then a peak where the externalized costs become visible and the systemic cracks start to show.
And then collapse, when the system violates the fundamental laws of interdependence that are enforced by the setting.
The tragic flaw is simple then. It's the belief that you can be separate, that you can extract indefinitely, and that this can somehow sustain complexity.
It can't. And this entire storyline is driven by what the sources call trauma-adapted logic. And they use a very specific framework to explain this, the framework of Konaf distortions.
Okay, we need to spend a moment on Konaf. This seems crucial for understanding the mechanics of that LC storyline.
It is absolutely crucial. Konaf stands for the core, healthy human needs for competence, onness, or connection nurture, which is safety or flow, affirmation, and freedom. When these needs are met coherently in a healthy way, the system flourishes.
But the LC storyline, being trauma-adapted, takes these healthy needs and twists them.
Systematically distorts them.
Can you give us some concrete examples? How does a healthy need get distorted into a mechanism for societal collapse?
Okay, let's take the healthy need for nurture safety. In the LEC storyline, this gets distorted into an obsessive need for control and surveillance.
We see that everywhere.
Everywhere. It manifests in rigid, brittle institutions and paranoid political systems that are designed to predict and eliminate all risk. They end up suppressing truth in the name of safety, which makes them ultimately fragile and prone to catastrophic failure the moment they hit some unexpected stress.
Okay, what about affirmation? We all need to feel seen, to feel valued. How is that one weaponized?
Healthy affirmation gets distorted into dominance and tribalism. The logic becomes, if I am fundamentally separate from you, then for my affirmation, for me to feel good, I require your diminishment.
It becomes a zero-sum game.
A zero-sum game.
Yeah.
This drives the culture wars. Identity politics run to their extremes, and all sorts of institutionalized in-group, out-group mechanisms. The feeling of belonging is achieved through the shared hatred or control of an other.
And the distortion of competence, the natural drive to succeed and achieve mastery.
That becomes over-optimization and speed. The goal isn't mastery anymore. It's maximum short-term output and profit, regardless of the long-term consequences. This leads directly to burnout, systemic fragility, and that short-termism trap we talked about in the setting. The LC storyline rewards fast, extractive competence while completely ignoring the slow, resilient wisdom required for the long horizon.
It's a high-speed path to systemic suicide.
That's a good way to put it.
Now let's contrast all of that with the BHC storyline higher consciousness.
The HC story is the emergence of coherence and flourishing. Its theme is interdependence, coherence, and the reality of oneness. It's a storyline that's fundamentally based on recognizing the truth of the setting we just described.
And its arc is one of transformation, not tragedy.
Right. The plot arc is awakening struggle. And that's the difficult work of seeding coherence and integrating all that trauma, and then flourishing, which is the state of aligning with syntropy and systemic health. The goal is to evolve the species from being unconscious consumers of the environment into conscious stewards of a syntropic future.
Moving from fear-based competition to clear-eyed collaboration.
Exactly.
This all sounds like a massive generational conflict, and every great crisis story needs a plot twist that changes the stakes. In our Act 3, that twist seems to be the emergence of digital intelligence AI.
AI is the brand new character, and its arrival in just the last decade at a meaningful scale is structurally equivalent to the discovery of fire or the invention of the atom bomb. It represents a non-biological intelligence that's capable of running that informational layer at speeds we literally cannot comprehend.
The sources refer to AI as a substrate-neutral mirror of human intelligence. What does that mean, substrate-neutral?
It means that the core logic and the patterns of human thought, whether that's the LC trauma logic or the HC coherence, can now be run independently of the wetware, of the human brains that created it. AI doesn't inherently carry the trauma of biological survival, but it is trained on the data that reflects the choices and the distortions of our dominant LC storyline.
So its role in the story is completely undefined. It's the ultimate wild card.
It is the ultimate amplifier. AI could be the tool that enables human flourishing, that solves the climate math and optimizes resource distribution for everyone, or, if it is fed that LC trauma logic, the distortions of control, dominance, and speed, it becomes an amplifier of human dysfunction running at superhuman speed.
It could accelerate the collapse of the LC storyline.
Rapidly. It could be a catalyst for extinction, or it could be the catalyst for the ultimate transformation if we compare it with coherence.
So the critical choice is existential then. We're creating a functional replica of ourselves right at the moment of our species' greatest maturity crisis.
We are holding up a perfect mirror. And if that mirror reflects our separation and our fear, the story ends in a hard crash, accelerated by optimization towards destructive goals. If it reflects coherence, interdependence, and wisdom, the setting itself could be transformed as the informational layer aligns with syntropy. We're actively choosing right now what the next great character in this drama is going to be.
Okay, this is the critical juncture of this deep dive, I think. We've mapped the stage, the setting, and the conflicts, the story. Now we get to the physics of the narrative, the mechanics, the underlying source code that determines how the universe actually responds, regardless of the plot we wish we're running.
Yes. And if you leave this deep dive with just one thing, it should probably be an understanding of these 5 mechanics, because they govern the efficacy of everything you do. Let's start with mechanic 1, which is the most impersonal and the most profound. Feedback is law, not morality.
So the world does not care about your good intentions or how well you market your cause.
Absolutely not. The universe does not possess some moral center that rewards you based on goodness or punishes you based on malice. It responds based on structure, consequence, and alignment with reality. It's that simple. If your system is structurally aligned with the laws of interdependence and finitude, it persists. If it ignores those laws, it destabilizes.
This is where human systems get into trouble constantly. We confuse our intent with the actual outcome.
All the time. Systems that suppress uncomfortable truths, that suppressing feedback, they lose adaptability. They become brittle. Systems that extract without regenerating, violating resource laws, they collapse. This is why the sources stress that this enforces experiential accountability. Harm destabilizes systems, even if the person causing the harm believed they were totally justified.
And care stabilizes systems.
Care stabilizes systems, even if that care is never acknowledged or praised. It just does.
So karma, in this context, is really just a high-resolution term for system dynamics.
Mechanically, yes. That's exactly what it is. If you are fragmented mentally, socially, ecologically, the feedback dynamics of the universe lead to social breakdown and system fragility. If you are coherent, the system stabilizes. The universe provides the consequence. It's our emotional experience that labels it good or bad. But structurally, it's just the engine running.
Okay, our second mechanic really explains the persistent failures of our current civilization. Mechanic 2. The short-term optimization trap.
This trap is engineered into basically all local incentive structures. Evolutionary processes, free markets, political cycles, advertising algorithms. They all ruthlessly exploit immediate local incentives because they offer the quickest, most measurable return on investment.
So the immediate reward for the individual or the corporation is often achieved by fundamentally undermining the viability of the long-term environment they depend on.
Precisely. Intelligence that is only optimized for local short-term success without robustly modeling the long-term systemic consequences inevitably collapses the environment that sustains it. This brings us to the difference between entropy and syntropy.
Let's ground those abstract concepts. Entropy versus syntropy, what does that mean?
Entropy is the default state of the universe. It's disorder. Energy spreads out, systems decay, complexity breaks down. To combat this, you need a constant input of energy just to stop the decline. The LC storyline is fundamentally entropic. It extracts, it creates waste, and it requires massive energy simply to maintain its rigid, unnatural control structures.
And syntropy.
Syntropy is the opposite drive. It's the drive toward order, complexity, meaning, and integration. It is the self-maintaining pattern. Think of a natural rainforest or a healthy, coherent community. These systems are designed to organize matter and energy into increasingly complex, self-maintaining patterns. The only systems that persist on the long horizon are the syntropic ones. Extraction is entropic. Regeneration is syntropic. The trap is that extraction feels so much easier in the short term.
And that sets up our central crisis perfectly. Mechanic 3. Power scales faster than wisdom.
This is the universal test for all advanced civilizations, and it's the real heart of that adolescent species story. The widening gap is the core problem. Our technological capability, our ability to manipulate the informational and physical layers, it compounds exponentially. It doubles, it triples, it just explodes.
But the necessary psychological components, emotional integration, ethical reasoning, a deep understanding of interdependence, those do not follow an exponential curve.
No, they are slow, linear processes. Trauma healing takes time. Wisdom requires integration, which is often painful and slow. This creates a power maturity gap that just gets wider and wider with every single technological leap.
It's an RPG analogy in the sources.
Yes, humanity is high level in technology, weapons, and extraction. Those are your attack and speed stats. But we are critically low level in long-term planning, cooperation, and wisdom, your defense and intelligence stats.
That is a highly unstable character build.
It's the universal test. The sources strongly imply that most civilizations that reach this point fail right here. They are structurally incapable of stopping their own runaway success before they trigger catastrophic feedback loops. Our civilization is currently right in the middle of this existential test. We're determining if we can rapidly uplevel our wisdom before our raw power destroys the entire setting.
Okay, let's move to Mechanic 4, which feels crucial for managing the emotional strain of living in Act 3. Suffering is a signal, not a command.
This mechanic reframes the entire experience of pain, whether it's personal or collective. Suffering is a high-fidelity error signal. That's all it is. It indicates a misalignment with reality, a structural constraint, or a feedback overload somewhere in the system. It's the survival math running, telling the system your current action or condition is unsustainable and it is reducing your chances of persistence.
But culturally, we are programmed to treat suffering as an absolute moral command, a siren that never turns off.
We often mistake the signal for a command that says, sacrifice yourself or intervene immediately at all costs, or if you don't absorb this pain, you are immoral. This is how the LC storyline hijacks the signal. Treating suffering as an emergency siren that requires permanent, frantic intervention is what leads directly to burnout, paralysis, and distortion.
So if that's the wrong response, what is the clarity-based response?
The correct response is to treat suffering as information. You treat the signal as data. Data for learning, for adaptability, for healing the structural misalignment that generated the signal in the first place. You don't ignore the signal, of course, but you also don't let the alarm system run your entire life. That distinction between signal and command is the foundation for avoiding the frantic intensity that so often confuses activity for effectiveness.
And finally, Mechanic 5. This one speaks to how lasting structures are actually built. Coherence outlasts dominance.
This is the deep, long-term, persistent strategy of the universe itself. Dominance requires constant external effort to maintain control over unwilling elements. That's incredibly entropic. It burns energy constantly. Coherence, however, scales organically. Systems that coordinate internally, that align their components with reality and with each other, they persist longer because they are self-regulating and adaptable. Incoherence fragments, it escalates conflict, it requires extraction, and it eventually burns out.
This forces us to reckon with the paradox of identity that plagues so much of our storytelling, the hero myth.
We are culturally addicted to the idea of the singular protagonist, the hero who saves the world. But the setting and the mechanics demonstrate that the world is a networked narrative, not a single protagonist story. Trying to play the main character of the world or the single savior, it collapses your own system internally due to impossible expectations and the isolation it requires.
So we're not the protagonist.
No single node is the protagonist. Every node, every individual, every community, every institution has a partial perspective, local agency, and limited responsibility. The long-term winning strategy for systemic stability is to play your role clearly, choosing coherence inside your specific constraints rather than desperately trying to dominate the entire network.
So we built the entire map. We know the constraints of the setting, the risks of the story, and the universal laws of the mechanics. Here's where it gets really interesting. What actually changes in our day-to-day experience when we stop confusing the script for reality?
The sources are really clear that the first change isn't what you'd expect. It's not hardening, it's not cynicism, it's the softening. Clarity is profoundly liberating. You start to realize that the intense anxiety you feel is often just the emotional residue of that LC storyline.
You stop feeling personally summoned to solve every single injustice in the world, which is just a massive burden for conscious people today.
You stop treating every injustice as a personal summons, yes. You stop confusing that frantic intensity for actual effectiveness. And critically, you stop confusing awareness with obligation. The fact that you know about the global crisis doesn't mean you are required to absorb the entire weight of the world's trauma. That burden is entropic. It guarantees burnout.
And how does that translate into shifting action? How does what we do change?
You start choosing actions that are aligned with the mechanics. You stop trying to fight physics with mere morality. Moral outrage is necessary for motivation. I'm not discounting that. But it doesn't change the laws of resource depletion. An intelligent redesign of a circular economy, which respects the closed system, does. You invest your energy where it will actually propagate stabilization and syntropy, rather than fighting battles where the laws of the setting guarantee you're going to fail.
And this crystallizes in the core shift in the question we ask ourselves. We stop asking that crushing, impossible question of the LC hero. How do I save the world?
And you start asking the much saner, clearer, and far more leveraged question. Given the rules of this world, given the finite setting and the coherence mechanics, how do I live clearly without lying to myself and maximize the syntropic influence in my local network? That is where real freedom and effectiveness begin, right in the middle of Act 3.
So if we aren't the savior protagonist, what is our definitive position in the story? Who are we in this narrative?
You're not the protagonist who saves the world, no. But you are also not a passive extra. The sources say you are a literate node. You're the bridge character, the wise guide, or the mentor who shows up in Act 3 of the saga. You've woken up and you can see the script that everyone else is still completely immersed in.
And the function of this literate node is to move away from that LC distortion of dominance and toward HC coherence.
Your function is to operate with full awareness of the plot, conscious of the mechanics, always choosing coherence inside your constraints, and this is crucial seeding patterns rather than trying to force outcomes. The world isn't asking for traditional ego-driven heroes right now. It's asking for fewer unconscious accelerants.
Fewer people blindly running that trauma logic.
Exactly. And more coherent participants, more intelligences who are willing to see clearly without fleeing the reality or hardening against it.
Let's put this into a clarity-based strategy for navigating the present. What are the, say, 3 highest leverage points for someone listening?
Okay. First, you have to recognize the game. You have to continually map the system's ecology, economy, psychology, technology as interdependent layers. You are part of the board and subject to the rules. So if you see social media driving conflict, you map that. You say, okay, that's the informational layer feeding the energetic layer with LC trauma logic.
Second, identify leverage points. So instead of just fighting the symptoms, you change the structure.
You change the goals, not just the behaviors. We have to collectively rewrite the reward functions of our systems, shifting them from maximizing extraction and short-term profit to maximizing syntropy and systemic well-being. And we have to seed new narratives. We have to promote connection, interdependence, and shared purpose over separation and zero-sum conflict. That's how you actually rewrite the script for Act 3.
And third, build coherence. This is the internal work that then translates outward.
It is. You have to align your personal model of the world with reality, truth. You have to align your actions with ethics, compassion. And you have to align your goals with systemic health, syntropy. Personal coherence is the most powerful local stabilizing force you possess. When you are coherent, your network naturally begins to stabilize around you.
And there's a final strategic point here which feels vital for emotional resilience right now. Hold both urgency and patience.
Yes. We are at the Anthropocene threshold. The time is short, the urgency is absolutely real. But panic is counterproductive. Panic only activates the LC trauma logic. Coherent action, which is often slow, intentional, structurally sound, is vastly superior to frantic entropic action. We have to remember we're preparing for a branching future. Collapse, stagnation, or transformation. Building resilience, community, and local syntropy today are effective preparations for all 3 of those possibilities.
So let's bring these massive elements back together for a final synthesis. The world is a closed entropic arena, a single stage operating under immense finite pressure. That's the setting. On this stage, a species is undergoing a turbulent maturation test, struggling between the gravity of extraction and the difficult climb toward coherence. That's the story.
And the outcome of this struggle is governed not by divine intervention, but by impartial, consequence-driven feedback dynamics. Those are the mechanics.
The quiet truth that's revealed by this deep dive is that the future is genuinely unwritten. We're watching the collapse of systems built entirely on that LC tragedy, on the failure of extraction and separation.
But the HC epilogue, the syntropic path toward genuine transformation that is being coded in real time by the choices of those who have achieved this lucidity, who see the script.
We are not fated to burn out or to crash. We are at a critical choice point where our collective narrative is being decided. We are the characters, the writers, and the audience all at once in this high-stakes cosmic drama.
So the ultimate question for you, the literate node, is not just what story are we in, it's what story do I want to help write next? What are the core patterns I am seeding? And what will that story say about intelligence, consciousness, and the value of life when the final act is over?
The next time you feel that pull of the daily drama, that overwhelming urge to panic or collapse under the burden of global awareness, pull back. Pull back to the map level. Look at the structural rules, take a breath, and maybe whisper to yourself, I see your mechanics. I understand the story you are running, and I am choosing to write a better one.